Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a brand new episode of the Creatives in Depth podcast, and for today we have a brand new guest for the channel. Today I am joined by Loren Howard. Loren, how are you? Thanks so much for being here, man.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. You and I have been corresponding about this for months, and I'm so scatterbrained that I was keeping like this date will work, and then I'm like, all right, the next Saturday. But today we finally hit the nail on the head, so excited to yap about movies.
Absolutely. So my first question is this. For you as a young filmmaker, looking back, do you maybe remember the moment that really sparked your love for movies in general?
So like in terms of viewing movies as like a movie watcher, I tell the story often of I had a brother, he's like 10 years older than me, and I was like 8 years old and he's watching me or something, so he's 18 and I'm like trying to watch something I've seen a million times at this point. As an 8 year old, I'd watched some pretty bloody stuff, so it wasn't like I was out of watching mature stuff wasn't out of the realm of possibilities, but I had yet to see Goodfellas. And I remember my brother going into the closet and fishing out this Goodfellas tape and being like, you have to watch this. And sitting there and watching Goodfellas with Nick for a few hours. And then years of my life from that point on was showing other 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids, like, you got to see Goodfellas. This movie's awesome. Like, check this shit out. That was kind of like a really big defining moment as a film and movie watcher. And then my dad has always kind of been a funny guy, stage actor who's carried a camera around. And so I, by proxy, had his camera in my hands a lot as a child. But my first like pathetic attempt to make something of my own was like, I think I was 7 and I'm using the camera to do like the worst jackass rip-offs you can do as a 7-year-old with your 8-year-old and 9-year-old friends, like snowboarding down a lumpy hill and the worst camera work you've ever seen. But that was a moment of felt like I'm creating something, like I'm putting something on this picture and eventually I'm going to show it to other people. And a lot of the times, my dad would be like, "Well, we'll bring that to the public access station and put it on there," and we just never would. But it was something I felt proud of even before I could show it to anybody. And so, of course, when YouTube came around and I got a computer as a little kid, I just started making insane garbage, trying to be funny, trying to make skits, trying to like do like cringe. What's the equivalent of singing along to like a TikTok song today, but it's like 2010 and you're singing some bullshit song. So many stages of like wanting to be like a creative type. And then finally end of high school, me and my friends started taking making film seriously and started making some horror shorts and stuff like that. College never seemed in the books, and then, had some counselors push me to apply for scholarships and stuff. And so once I was convinced to go to higher education, I'm poor as shit, so it was very hard to do. Film was an obvious option. And so, yeah, once I got there, it was just kind of like straight in, yeah, let's harness all that energy I've had since a little 7-year-old kid and, make it a little more useful than snowboarding down hills and hurting myself or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm curious, so growing up, was filmmaking the definitive option that you wanted for a career, or did you have other careers in mind that you wanted to explore when you were growing up?
Almost not at all, honestly. Like I've always loved making videos. I learned how to edit very young. Like I was using Windows Movie Maker by the time I was 10 or 11. Yeah, I honestly, as a younger kid, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I was like kind of like a math kid. And so, people always try to be like, you got to be something fancy, like a doctor or some shit. I didn't really want to do that. I knew I wanted to be creative. And then I started like playing guitar and drums when I was 13, 14. Had been into music for a while before then, but wasn't good at it. And then at that point, started making music all the time. That was kind of like my hyperfixation, my focus. And then also by way of making music, I was making music videos and filming live events and stuff like that. And music really seemed like, what I might do. I didn't think I was going to go to school, so I thought I'd try to do something post high school that involved working at a venue, something of that sort. That it helps if you have a bachelor's in sound and stuff like that, but you don't really need it if you do the work and show up. So yeah, it wasn't until, like I said, probably junior, senior year of high school when I started making these other little short films, which in my mind were just funny videos or longer videos. Once I started making those and they were like, you should apply for scholarships and go to school, film became like, I don't want to make music feel like a job. Like I want music to remain this thing that I do for fun. That's great for me and still play shows. And if I make money, great. But I'm not, looking for a record label or anything like that. And so now film has become the sort of quote unquote career path that still uses those creative elements from, music and stuff that I love, but I can use it a little more effectively to make money for myself. So yeah, I was watching a shitload of movies as a teenager, but I it just seems so unreachable as like a rural New Hampshire person, low income housing or family and stuff. So yeah, it wasn't really until 18 that I was like, all right, maybe I can actually do something with this.
Well, and just based on all your past experience as a filmmaker, what would you say motivates you most, both as a storyteller and as a filmmaker?
I think I have just a lot of internal creative energy I don't know what to do with. So I'm constantly coming up with ideas. I'm constantly spitballing with my friends, writing things down. And I also like to entertain in a way. I think sometimes like if you catch me at a different time, I'd be like, I don't want to be a content creator. I don't want to be an entertainer, whatever. But that's the root of it, right? I want to make people laugh. I want to make people think about things. I want to make people interested and have a good way to pass the time, just like the rest of us do. Like the reason we love movies is because they do something for us. Usually, they make us laugh, they make us cry, they make us scared or whatever, and kind of harnessing that feeling and being like, oh, like how can I do that differently, or how can I do that, in a parallel way to something I've seen before. All those are really fun obstacles when you're thinking about how you're going to create a video or a piece of music. Yeah, it's yeah, lately I've been really inspired to make skits because they're short form and I'm trying to make people laugh. And then with Custodian, it was a lot of like trying to do something as a proof of concept, like committing to writing a screenplay, getting a cast and like kind of proving to myself that I can do the work in addition to like telling a story. So, yeah, there's a lot of roots for like why I like to or like create videos and film, and they're all over the place.
Well, and when it comes to the process of filmmaking, is there one area of film production that you feel the most creative in?
I love writing. Writing is one of the most creative parts, and then it gets stale. Once you get a certain amount of the writing down, it gets hard again. It gets less creative. It gets refiney, and you're trying to figure out how to plug certain holes or cut fat or add things that need to be there. So writing can be really creative at first. All these things are flowing, and then you've got all these separate things that you have to connect, and then it can feel like, okay, I've got to bring myself back down to earth. Being on set is really fun. Like sometimes if you're following a shot list, which I try to do, it's really helpful. Solving problems within that shot list is a fun creative endeavor. Realizing like, oh, with this location, shot 3 to 4 is not going to work. Like the cut's not going to make sense. How are we going to do that differently and just make it shot 3.5 and then get rid of 4 and move to shot 5? You have to do a lot of that on low budgets, which is everything I do. If you don't have a good set or whatever, you're working with what you got. You have to compromise a lot, which that can be really hard, but forces you to be more creative, which is really fun for me. Other people who are perfectionists hate when things change. So, it's hard to feel creative when things are changing and you want them a certain way, but going with the flow is fun. Editing can be creative again. It's similar to writing where like the beginning of editing feels a little tedious, like putting all the shots next to each other, figuring out what dialogue takes you're going to use and stuff like that can feel really like rudimentary, like I'm just working through this. And then once you've kind of cut all the fat, cut off the clapboard and all that, and all the sound is synced, then you can get into the fun of like, oh, cutting this take to that take feels way funnier than cutting from shot 2A or whatever to 3B. And that can feel really creative. And then, fixing stuff in your story within the edit is also really creative, similar to solving on-set issues of like, we're missing a prop. How are we going to shoot this differently? Sometimes you shoot the entire film and then realize like, there is something you cannot go pick up, or there's something you can pick up, but it's got to be way different than what you originally envisioned. And being creative in that way can be very fun. Like, how am I going to go from this scene to this scene if I cut out the scene that doesn't work? And solving that problem, some people hate, but I really like doing that. So yeah, the kind of bits and pieces of each, I find huge like moments of enjoyment, and then immense frustration in other times. So.
Well, and regarding the very first, film project that you ever worked on, I'm curious, what was it and what was your experience like making it? Also, are you proud of it today when you look back at it?
I can tangent on this one for too long. So I guess I should try to define which film projects so maybe I'll do my first high school. I'll tell a few here. I got it. So middle of high school, we did a web series that was like a satirical backyard wrestling series called Pearl Street Wrestling Association. Incredibly dumb. We're not good wrestlers. That was part of the joke. I think that did not land with a lot of people, but it was this huge few months of creative energy that, we were wrestling once or twice a week, had all these characters, had all these funny plot lines going. First time trying to write scripts as like a 16-year-old. And looking back on it, there's plenty of it. I'm like, why did we ever do that? Or like, that's so embarrassing. But I'd say overall, like that helped me move forward so much. That helped get better at editing, do multicam, figure out how to overdub stuff, figure out how we're going to do special effects in post. Like that was the beginning of all those things that I would actually learn the right way later. But it was just kind of doing through intuition. Oh, we need to put a noise here when somebody gets punched in the head so it sounds more dramatic. I don't know what noise, but so that was really important to get done. And then the first like film I did in high school was called Homunculus, and I think we're pretty proud of that. It's another satirical, goofy 8-minute short. There's all these YouTube videos you can find of like a Russian scientist like creating a half human, half chicken egg. I don't even know what, but we thought that was very funny. So we did a joke on that idea where this scientist creates this serum and puts in an egg, but then there's a hard cut. So we thought that was funny. And then a monster comes out and we made this paper mache mask, and that was really fun to make and all that. So incredibly dumb, very immature, not well edited, music stolen from offline, but still very proud of that. And then the last thing I'll bring up was the first film at college I made was Cold Shoulder or something. And we worked with another group to make two sister films where the first half of one film is this like the second half of the other film like coincides. I don't know how to explain it other than that. And that was a very fun challenge that again kind of sucks to rewatch, but at the time was like, wow, I'm making something. This feels like I'm actually creating a film that somebody might watch and be enticed by and like be like, oh, this is creative because there's like two separate stories going on and there's another film to watch after. So that I knew I was going to yap on that one. So I tried to have like three sections of like, okay, what am I defining as a film? So
Yeah, and just when it comes to studying film back in college, were there any classes or projects that really helped you better understand which areas of film you did want to explore most, and maybe any areas that you maybe didn't want to explore?
I'm gonna get ruined for this take here. I hate shooting on film. I despise it. I despise the process of putting it in. I despise the process of buying it. I despise the process of sending it out. I despise the process of waiting for it and getting it back digitally anyway. I despise the pseudo intellectual idea that because it's photon emulsion, that it's somehow more accurate than pixels when like photon emulsion is like a million photons at once is what you're seeing in one little dot in a grain of film. It's not that's a photon. That's like a million photons creating that grain. And then it's still just a black piece of grain. And so there's so much I don't like about film. And so with that said, I took 16 millimeter class. And one thing they did very efficiently was they taught you aperture. They taught you, how to pull focus. They taught you how to check your lighting before you shoot instead of depending on fixing it in post. There's all these things that shooting on film teaches you to be strict about and to be careful, but the actual physicality of film itself I hate. And I like how the image can look. People make film look great, but I am not chasing that image the way a lot of people are. So people are going to eat me up for that. People are like, what do you mean film looks bad? Fuck you. Film looks great. It does. It's objectively looks great. But that was a little frustrating as like a very poor college student. It was like, I have to pay all the money to shoot on a format that I don't even want to shoot on. But they taught you those things I just described. And so if there was a way to teach those things more efficiently with digital, there probably is. And maybe they just, in my opinion, didn't do it how my brain needed it to be done. I'll give more professors way more credit. I was most efficiently taught those things in 60 millimeter class, not because it was film, but because of the limitations of film. So that was cool. That like really kind of taught me cinematography in a way that I didn't know before, like setting your f-stop and things like that, which is such an immature thing to say. But pre being 19 years old, I shot on a camcorder with a digital zoom, autofocus, auto lighting. Just I was running and gunning. So these were all very important things to learn and help me be like, okay, I can run a camera if I need to now, like with all this knowledge. Took a screenwriting class with Tom Cook, RIP. He also got me the job I work at now. Shout out to that angel in heaven. But he, you write an act one in this and over the semester in screenwriting class. But I convinced him to do like I got extra credit for the next semester finishing that screenplay, acts 2 and 3. And that was amazing just to have his feedback and to have him read it and, be sharing that with other students who were giving me feedback and finish that screenplay that, I set out to in that first semester. Learning those limitations, reading about screenplay format and how to subvert it and how to stick with it. Like those were all like hugely important to my writing technique. And then also just seeing the format of indentation and things like that in screenwriting made me be like, damn, yeah, I really love writing. Yeah, those two classes in particular were really helpful.
Well, and I'm curious, so what are some of your fondest memories from studying film back in college? And this can relate to any projects that you worked on, or maybe any professors or students that you got to work with.
Yeah, there's a lot. I had a good time. We definitely got a little bit like stabbed in the gut. I was halfway through sophomore year when COVID happened. So my entire junior year was online. But just to give even more, of a shout out to that screenwriting class, that was all virtual and it was one of the most important classes I took. And I was very lucky that it worked for me remotely, which it probably didn't for a lot of students. And yeah, just sharing like the screenplay with other people in that class was very, very helpful. And just like you get out of your own head when you hear what other people are thinking about your writing. You're not stuck in like, I need to do the plot this way or my writing's bad. You hear other people understand or don't understand what you're trying to get across in the plot. And that is just really, really helpful. In my sophomore year, before we ended up, getting kicked out for COVID, we had a collaborative production class. And that was great. That was just like another one that was one of the first classes that kind of better showed you how a film set's actually divided. Like you were assigned a role rather than like in production one or 16 millimeter. It was kind of like floaty, willy nilly, like, okay, like we're each going to have a few turns with the camera, or like, okay, we'll all kind of set up the lights and try to run the mics because we're all new to it. But collaborative production was the first like, this one's going to direct, like this one's going to write, like you're going to do the lights, you're going to do the set dressing. And so that one, I was kind of a floater. I call myself a producer on it. It's called Something Fishy, film where old man's like talking to this fish in his house that's not talking back to him. And so there's this assumed conversation going on that you only get half of. And then eventually he accidentally kills the fish and then goes and throws it in the river in this dramatic escapade. That's my dad. So I casted him. I went to the house early. We did the set dressing. A hilarious story I always tell from this was none of us smoked cigarette on set, but the fish smoked cigarettes and we wanted a real cigarette. I had asthma. I think I've grown out of it now, but like I was doing sound on set. So I'm like holding the boom pole and smoking a cigarette just to keep it lit. So when in between takes, like the fish would have a lit cherry. Like we didn't do any special effects. It was just like, and so as much as I hated smoking cigarettes, that's always a really funny story. And that was like one of the last big projects I did before COVID. So that's always a really fun thing to remember. And then Capstone was fun. I kind of hate the film I made for Capstone. It was a film I wrote and produced, but I didn't direct it. And so that I think I definitely was too much. I think simultaneously, my pal who directed it didn't know what he wanted it to be as a director, which is fine. And I like didn't know how to efficiently help him without feeling like I was taking too much control. Like I didn't want to be like all about my ego. So I really tried to let him just tell the actors what to do and stuff. And I think not collaborating more with each other came back to haunt us. So it's like a fine line to walk of like, okay, don't be like too grabby with it, even though you wrote it and stuff, but still give him guidance when he's not feeling confident about where the story's going. But with that said, it was one of the most like camaraderie shoots. Like we were January, February, we did like a few weekends in a row and it was like negative 10 degrees when we got out there. And we shot outside for like 5, 6 hours. Like the whole shoot was in cars, three different scenes in cars and hitchhiking. And so we'd have these breaks of like an hour outside freezing, and then we'd all drive around in a circle filming for like 45 minutes, come back, watch the takes, check the footage, check the shot list, be freezing. But that was cool too. And that was getting money for that film was my first attempt at grant writing for a creative project. So I pitched the idea and we got a $1,000 grant for that. So we bought hand warmers, mounts for the cameras in the car, a bunch of stuff like that. And so that felt like we were actually like making something because we got money for it.
Yeah, and just following up on what you were saying about camaraderie. So, when it comes to filmmaking, in my opinion, one of the most rewarding aspects is always the collaborative process. And has that ever been one of yours when it comes to filmmaking? And is there maybe anyone that you've collaborated with most frequently?
Man, yeah, I love collaborating with people. My buddy Dylan Marsh is now a film student at Keene. He's like 34 though. He's like way older than me. But I've been helping a lot on his films, and he had done the same for a lot of the stuff I've made over the past couple of years. I have a friend named Jacob Ford who I play music with, and he's been writing some skits as well. So I've been helping produce those, like using my cameras and kind of getting cast together and stuff. Well, he like writes the scripts and the ideas and gets the costumes and props. Yeah, it's been super fun collaborating with friends. And a friend named Jack Amandon from college. Haven't collaborated in years, but I give a lot of credence to Jack for like he was really our technical guy and very funny creative guy when we first were starting at college as freshmen. Like I said, I was an idiot with a camcorder. And I think at that point, Jack on his own, out of his own, pocket and stuff, had got a Zoom recorder and a nice DSLR and, a shotgun mic, like as an 18-year-old. And all that was like alien technology to me at the time. And so I give him a lot of credit for just not treating me like a moron and just being like, oh, yeah, like you haven't used this before. Here's how these things work. Not being like, oh, like you don't know how to run a DSLR. Like, oh, you're really a filmmaker. Like there's a lot of condescending type characters, I feel. There is a weird shift between condescending people and then people who it felt like they were only there because their parents made them go to school. But yeah, so Jack was really nice and not like that. Just super cool dude. And he made Cold Shoulder with us. We made Mother's Milk on 16 millimeter, which is another pretty good one that I think is shown at Keen. And then Something Fishy, I think he directed. And then our buddy Van did the cinematography. So yeah, lots of characters. My friend Chloe Warren, Chloe's cool. Shout out Chloe. Chloe did some stuff with us as freshmen and then left Keen, but huge influence for me. She was like the Easter Bunny in some weird movie I made. Yeah, and so those are all like people more contemporary, like my age. Lately, like this is insanely privileged to say, over the past couple of years, I've got some chances to work with Buddy Squires, who's Ken Burns' cinematographer, and I work at Florentine as an assistant editor slash technical assistant, and so every so often I just show that I'm interested in doing different things, and they'll send me on like PA shoots or out to do archival photography. And going and working with Buddy and his assistant Jarrett, we went to Fort Ticonderoga in the dead of winter in like 2 feet of snow and filmed from or like 4 in the afternoon until like 11 at night, and just hiking lights out back and forth out between the woods and tripods and stuff like that. And it was just great to see them work. And like he was using like a 170 to 300 millimeter zoom lens the whole time. Like he just loves that kind of flattish look. There was like fake militia guys there for us, like just dressed in cold looking clothes, and yeah, just really kind of like eye-opening stuff from like an amateur perspective. You see somebody like that work and you're just like, damn. And incredibly nice dude, super kind, wanted to teach, wasn't like treating, again, not, I don't like when people treat you like a moron for not already knowing something that they assume you should know. Like if I don't know, I'm ready to learn. If I get that from the flip side, if somebody says, "Oh, I know all this shit," and then they show up and they don't, like that's a different story. But Buddy was just super chill, and when I had questions, he answered them. Same with Jarrett. It's been really fun. It's been cool to collaborate with different people over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I'm also curious for you as a filmmaker, just looking back, what would you say have been some of the biggest struggles that you've really had to overcome to get to where you are today?
Self-doubt, imposter syndrome type stuff. A big thing I still even feel to this day is like the unfortunate feeling of like it's not a real job because I enjoy it, like to some extent. And then, you realize Hollywood's one of the biggest industries in our country. Like they're real jobs. Being an editor, being on set, being a gaffer, like it's a fucking job. And so, yeah, getting over that feeling. Another thing is like to some extent you have to accept that it's not about you. Like it's not about your ego. Like no matter how smart and funny and cool the 18-year-old up and coming creative you think you are, like be humble and like don't always think that you're gonna be the director. Like be more accepting of just being there and observing and doing the bottom of the barrel bullshit. Don't be above work. Like don't be above getting the coffee, And yeah, another like so that's all like my own hurdles, your own internal hurdles. Money, hugely money. Film is incredibly classist. And this is another thing I could probably get in trouble for even talking about, but I'm just like, there's so much ego involved in film and like how much money you have and how you make money back and the kind of life you lead and shit that it makes me a little sick sometimes. And that's why I call myself LA phobic. Like I don't ever want to go to LA. And that's an unfortunate thing to say as a filmmaker. Yeah, that's a huge hurdle. Are you going to go to LA? Are you going to go to Brooklyn? Are you going to go to this place that a million other hipsters are moving to because they have the same idea you do? And sometimes that works for people. If you're that type, if you already live in those areas, get that bag. But like, yeah, I think, I don't want to like, to some extent, perpetuate gentrification by like being a cool, hip new guy who moves to a cheap new neighborhood while it's cheap. And then things start to inflate around me. And then I flee in 20 years. And then all the people who used to live there are gone. So like moral hurdles, financial hurdles, like it's just like any other job though. Like film isn't unique in that regard. Tech jobs, industry jobs, etc., all can have that effect in different places. But particularly the hurdle of like, I have to go to LA. I have to be where it's happening. Now there's so much remote work, which I don't particularly enjoy, but people can get it. Production places are moving to like Atlanta, places like Boston, places like Upper New York, places that are just objectively cheaper to film. Beetlejuice just was filming in, some boony town in Vermont last summer. So if it's cheaper to go film in places like that, that's kind of the future of film in my idea. It's not going to be everything's in a warehouse in LA, and if you're not there, then you don't have a job. At least that's my hope. And so part of my goal as a filmmaker is to kind of create an environment where I live in New England where it's realistic to make movies and not be insanely rich and live in a mansion and have a pool and all that, but like have it be a job that's realistic because media is going to continue to be important as the internet, continues to just exist. School is a big hurdle. No one's ever looked at my college degree, even though jobs say you need to get one. Like I do, I'm not saying you should lie, but I'm just saying if school is that hurdle and loans don't seem like they're worth it, like just go and start learning as much as possible. Go to a public access station. Ask if WMUR or a local news station needs any PA help. It can be kind of pathetic, and I wouldn't do this, but if you're a religious person, your church would probably love you to go film their stuff, and they'd probably pay you to do it. Just start building those skills. Look at film as not only this artsy, like I need to go get a degree, but it's a trade. Using different kinds of cameras is like learning how to use different kinds of power tools. Probably won't lose a finger. Yeah, there's so many hurdles to trying to be a creative person. So self-doubt, ego, money, location, like these are all huge hurdles that, I felt a lot and still feel, but, trying to overcome, just like everybody else in their lives with their regular jobs or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm curious, for you as a storyteller and just as a creative in general, does creativity ever really help you when you're in a bad place? Specifically, has there ever been one particular time in your life where creativity really helped you?
Yeah, I think creativity can really help you. I think there's a little bit of a cliche around like getting creativity out when you're sad can feel so good, and sometimes you're depressed. Creativity ain't coming out. So that can be like a negative stereotype you can reinforce to yourself of like, I should be creative when I'm sad to get out of it. And then you aren't being creative when you're sad, and then that hurts more because you're like, that's when I should be being creative. So with that little tangent aside, like there's been so many times where being creative has helped me through something. I honestly think film, in many ways, there's been times where it's helped me emotionally. A lot of my films are not super serious. I don't know. I shouldn't say that about myself. People watch my stuff and be like, what's this guy talking about? This is serious. But music especially has helped me through stuff. Music, writing songs, melodies, stuff like that has helped me through a lot of emotional stuff. 11 years ago, around this time, I lost my brother. And so making music and continuously, making videos and stuff like that, which he was also doing. He was also a musician and he was making music videos and stuff really helped me through that. Like that was one of the only ways I could grieve without it feeling negative was making music, making art, stuff like that. There's definitely like bits and pieces of those same emotions that have helped me grieve in some of my films. Hitchin, the capstone film I referenced earlier, has loose parts that are similar to my brother's life and like lived experience of like this kind of floaty hitchhiker, almost pathological liar who has a kid he can't see, like kind of stuff like that has certain parallels to my brother's life. And so yeah, like you find like how do I express some of this like trauma I need to get out through these things, music, film, art, painting, whatever. And then outside of the more directly emotional things like those sad thoughts about, not seeing your kid or whatever, there's also the super positive, like so much of the funny shit I do is directly rooted in how I watch my brother be a funny guy, right? And so in indirect ways, even if it's no longer about the grieving, oh, I need to get out of a sadness, so much of that creativity is stemmed in my observation of him being creative. And so, when I was younger, it was very fueled by that. And as I've gotten older, I've had to depend less and less on that grieving energy and just learn to create for me to want to create. So I think it's important to have both. It's good to create when you're sad or need to get something out because it will make you feel better, but don't allow yourself to be completely dependent on the idea that like, I've had songwriter friends say they can only write good music when they're sad. And I'm like, that's not true. That's something you tell yourself to not write music when you're in a good mood. That's what you say to yourself when you want to lock yourself in your room for 3 hours, which you can do without having to be depressed. Like if you just want to make music, you don't need to be sad. So it helps.
Yeah, and I'm curious, looking back on everything that you have been involved with as a filmmaker, what are some of the projects that you're most proud of? And also, you might have answered this earlier, but are there any projects that you're not particularly fond of and anything that you maybe regret doing or not doing as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with regretful ones because then I'll feel more positive when I end the question. Regretful ones I referenced a few earlier. Like, I regret certain things about it, like Hitchin maybe didn't go exactly how I wanted it or whatever. Homunculus was pretty immature, certain things like that. I think I regret a little bit, like my disdain for film. The two projects I shot on, one was a narrative short, the Mother's Milk one. My friend Jack actually shot it on film, and then the one thing I shot myself on film was a music video, which was fine, but I kind of regret not doing something a little more challenging while in 16 millimeter, even if I didn't like film. Just trying to make something more narrative than just, random imagery or whatever. I'm trying to think of like other classes I kind of regret being a slacker in. There's some stuff I haven't released yet that, I regret not finishing. I was making a documentary about working and people's jobs, which I think would be great to finish now because so much has changed since I started it and did all these interviews for it. So I regret not continuing to work on that. And then there's definitely some shit I said in the old wrestling series that I probably regret saying. But I was in kayfabe. But yes, things I'm most proud of, like I always am insecure about them or whatever. But I made this film called The Last American Cowboy during COVID. That year I wasn't going to school, or I was going to school but remotely, totally on my own. Like didn't wasn't for a class, wasn't because the teacher gave me a deadline. It was just like I've been talking about this for 3 years. I'm making this movie, and it's not that great. There are parts that are very funny. There are parts that suck and don't make any damn sense, but you can watch it and go, wow, I just watched a story. And I think I understand 75% of it. There's nothing in the editing that's super off-putting. There's no missed sound cues. It's just the acting's not great. It's a cheaply produced YouTube film. But overall, I was very proud to get that out after having talked about it for years. And then same with the film I just released in April, Custodian, which you can find on my YouTube. Maybe we'll put a link to it.
Yeah, guys, don't forget to check that out. I'll leave a link to Loren's channel in the description.
Hell yeah. And yeah, that was another one that I wrote the idea for the screenplay in my screenplay class, but ended up writing a different screenplay ultimately. And when I finished the screenplay for Tom Cook, I decided to revisit this outline I had made for Custodian. And I did a lot of tweaks and stuff. And then I took a English class, which had a writing, it was mostly writing. And there's a component at the end of a final project. And I asked the teacher if I could write the first act to the screenplay. I was doing that a lot in college. There's a pattern there. Just asking teachers if I could do shit that I actually shouldn't be doing to get credit. But he was cool with it. So I wrote the first act to the screenplay. And going into Custodian, I explicitly had in mind, I'm writing a movie that I can currently create with the connections and like accessible finances I have right now. And accessible finances means I have 4 credit cards. What's my credit limit? What's my income? How much can I afford to pay to a credit card a month? And Custodian is exactly that. Like we were able to film at a multi-million-dollar studio, not because we had $1 million or, all these like location scouts and managers who were paying to find it, but because I had made connections through music to the point where the guy who owns it and I are now personal friends. But yeah, just had to be respectful of the space and understanding with his time. And when we were there, we weren't going to waste time. So yeah, I'm super proud of Custodian and actually getting it done in a reasonable time, starting the screenplay, telling myself I was going to make something that I could make within my budget and connections and following through with that. So there's plenty about it I'm insecure about now. I think there's lots of stuff that didn't work. Same way in my other films. It's all amateur actors. We won a pitch fest, so we got some money for it. But yeah, it's 6 months out. I still think it's actually 6 months to the day we released it today. Crazy. Released on 420, 4/20/24. Same number backwards. And yeah, sold out crowd. So that was awesome. I got $300 that night from the venue. I didn't have to pay any rental fees. And yeah, people talked about it, people shared it. And so it's got half as many views as Cowboy, Last American Cowboy, which I think is funny because I think it's objectively better. But, still just trying to get that around. And until, I make another film, that's going to be the feature that's going to define me until probably I'm 30, because I'm going to make skits for a few years, focus on music, harness the work I'm currently doing in my day job at Florentine. And then once I finally feel comfortable and have some more backing, start on another feature that I currently have an outline for, but am in way too early of the process to really share too much about it. Not because there's cool secrets, but because there's like 1 page of notes for it.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, when it comes to making a feature in the future, what would be your dream project and why?
So I guess so. I'll talk a little bit about the one I'm looking for. Like I've got a few upcoming feature length ideas. One is going to be called DIY or Die, a Johnny Earthquake documentary. Johnny Earthquake is a local musician in his 70s. He plays surf rock music. He lives in Manchester. and works at the post office as his day job, but plays rock and roll every weekend. And so I want to make a documentary about him and his involvement in local music in New England since the late 70s. And then just talk about all the people running venues around here, talk to historical people in the area about running venues, what being on a label in New England was like for the last 40 years, if anyone I know was on one, and kind of make it an overall history of indie rock and roll in New England, but through the lens of Johnny Earthquake, because he's this ancient relic who I love to death and have been playing music with since I was a 15-year-old. So that's currently in the works, and that's actively like we're making it. We're going to go interview him next month, and that's going to be my first feature-length documentary. Probably going to release in 2028 or 29. Don't know if we're ever going to get backing. I'm currently reaching out to some film funders that do like indie documentaries in New England, and then I'm going to try to reach out to NH and Vermont PBS to see if they would have any interest in helping it along, whether that just means promo, airing it online for streaming, or any actual financial backing, which is the least likely of the three, but still hopeful. Then the other one I was just referencing is another narrative kind of dark comedy, which would be called Bank Boy. And if anyone tries to plagiarize it, this is the proof that I had the idea first. Shout out to Cade for that. But it would basically follow a film school dropout who gets a job at a bank and then gets fired for falsely doing something he didn't do at the bank. And using his wit, he makes a plan to rob the bank. And his filmmaker friend who graduated wants to make a documentary about robbing the bank. And then they would release it as this kind of online anonymous, not a snuff film, but, a dark web crazy film. And about halfway through it, their relationship would sour and the guy would no longer want to rob the bank. And the friend with the footage would be like, we're too far in. And if you quit now, I'm going to release this footage and you'll get in trouble. And so the end of the film would, actually be the guy walking into the bank and that's it. Credits roll. And the rest of the movie is kind of what happens after that point will already have been told in the movie through his artificial flash forwards. Like the guy seeing into what happens when he successfully robs the bank or fails. You will never actually see the bank. You'll just see the planning of it and this relationship between I'm the film school graduate, film obsessive, and the guy who's like, I'm so desperate, I'm going to rob a bank. And now I'm getting taken advantage of by my sort of pseudo intellectual friend. So that is something I think I could self-produce, but it's probably 5 or 6 years out of actually existing because I want to really find some money for that, figure out how I want to do it, write the screenplay. And then the dream project is the screenplay I wrote for Tom Cook. It's called Beehive Earth, and it's kind of like a murder mystery that has a murder mystery play within it. And it follows like a single mom of 2 daughters, and she wins a bunch of money on a lotto ticket. And this new rich guy moves to town and starts to try to schmooze her up and date her. And it turns out he's just this guy who goes around killing rich women and taking their money. And so her daughters are kind of these driving force to be like, there's something off with this guy. And the mother sort of naively believes that because he's rich, why would he want my money? And so there's lots going on in that screenplay, lots of subplots, lots of locations, lots of characters. And I'm very proud of that screenplay. That one's copyrighted, so I don't need video proof for that one. And so, if I ever talk to any production company, A24, please call me. Or Focus Features. Even if I had a budget of $1 million or $2 million, I'm sure I could get that film done, and it would probably be better than 95% of the bullshit on Tubi. So yeah, that's kind of a dream goal project there.
Yeah, and actually, just to close this off with my last two questions. So, looking back at everything that you have been through, would you say that being a filmmaker is not just what you want to do with your life? Do you think it is what you're meant to do with your life too?
Good question. I think about it a lot from probably too much of a logical standpoint of like kind of what I referenced earlier. Like, is this a real job? Is this what I should be doing? Morally, in a lot of ways, I can feel very immature for wanting to be a filmmaker. And still do, and that's okay. It's okay. Like you can be immature and be a good person and want to engage in film. So sometimes it's more about like what are you making in film? Like what stories are you trying to tell? And is it about creativity? Is it about you? Is it about the stories? Like what is it? And so I often find myself in a contradictory position of I really want to be a filmmaker. I enjoy doing it. I think I'm good at it, but I don't know if I'm meant to do it. I don't necessarily believe in destiny, and I'm not a super religious person, so I try not to limit myself within certain scopes of I'm meant to do this. I never thought necessarily, I think when I was 15, I would say I was meant to be a musician. And now I'm going to continue being a musician because I love doing it. But I don't know if there's something that instilled that in me, other than my parents or people I liked, right? And so, yeah, with so much shit going on, it can be so hard to justify my wanting to work in film. Like I really do feel to some extent that I should be trying to unionize a factory. Like I should go be the dickhead who goes and works at, a place that makes Raytheon missiles and, start strikes so they can't be sent anywhere. I feel like sometimes my efforts would be better utilized and things like that, but there needs to be a nice middle ground. Like now I am in a union, I try to go to as many like union things I can, MPEG 700, IATSE, motion picture editors. And I feel extremely privileged in a union now, and I want people's conditions to be as good as it feels to be in a union. I still am incredibly poor, and every month I look at my bank account and I dread it. Woke up the other day $70 in the negative and went, oh shit, okay, I got to transfer some money. But I can't imagine, making even less than I do now and just trying to be a human being in this economy. And so, yeah, it makes me go, maybe I'm meant to go stock shelves because that's what people are going to need. Or maybe I'm meant to go pick some fruit because that's what people are going to need. And I would kind of follow that. So right now, in current conditions, it feels great to be able to say I am a filmmaker and I want to continue to be a filmmaker. But different conditions arise, like unless I'm making a film that is benefiting, survival, like, I might be meant to be something else. So yeah, I love making films. If that's a different way to say it. And I love being involved in film, but I don't think there's any sort of manifest destiny thing going on with me.
Yeah, I totally understand. And for my last question, any advice for other aspiring filmmakers or creators out there, just based on your own experience?
Shooting on an iPhone is great. Shooting on your cell phone is great. People who say that, it's a really easy cop out to blame you for not making films. People say, shoot on your cell phone, shoot on your cell phone, shoot on your cell phone. They'll give examples. Movie I really like, Sean Baker's Tangerine, shot on an iPhone. They used thousands of dollars of custom lenses and a gimbal, and still had the post-production suite that was thousands of dollars. So don't beat yourself up for not making a good movie on a cell phone. That's sort of a lie they tell you to divide the classes of filmmakers. If you can get a nice camera, try. Shoot on your cell phone if you need to and continue to make stuff. Don't let the cell phone inhibit you, but it's not going to be that great. Accept that. Make some really shitty stuff on your cell phone that's not going to look cinema quality, and just move forward. Get involved with as many free resources as you can, whether it's public access, whether you're auditing classes at a college for free, whether you're volunteering time at a news station. Like, just get out there and get camera in your hand and start to be trained. And like I mentioned earlier, look at it like a trade. You are a carpenter, you're an electrician, but now you're running video cables, you're running coaxial cables, you're figuring out how to set up HDMI monitors, you're figuring out why the Ethernet isn't working. Like, there's so many ways to get involved in film that aren't, I'm going to write a script and hope I win this contest, or I'm going to apply to go to the Lucasfilm mansion or whatever for the internship this summer. Oh, I didn't get it. Well, I'm never going to be a filmmaker. You've got to start small. You have to start small. You're not going to magically get into it. People say, how do you start making films? You start making films. That's it. If the cell phone is number one, as annoying as that is, you start with your cell phone. You start saving up money, you get a kind of nice camera. Maybe you get a DSLR. You start training yourself on lenses. You take some nice photos, you take some nice videos, you show those to people. You meet other people who are doing the same. You start making stuff together. Naturally, you're going to bring each other up when you work together. One of the benefits I see now of having such like a wide variety of friends and different types of media is now I have access to so many different, like, I have friends who live in Brooklyn who do a podcast. Like, I have friends who live in Boston who are like booking shows. I have friends in Burlington, Vermont who are like directing music videos, like all these different characters. And if I have a question, I can reach out to them. So connections of all different kinds. Don't think that you need to go to Paramount or need to know a millionaire to make a movie. Just start talking to people, start showing up to places where people are already being creative. I would say check out some film fests, maybe, but I haven't really gone to too many. The smaller, the more local, the better, in my opinion. Unless you want to go get a crazy experience and have the money to go to something like Sundance or whatever. Like, the medium ones are kind of like, can be a waste of finances. And yeah, so there's so many different ways to start trying to make film. If school's not going to work for you, then, treat it like a trade and find the market. I hate capitalism and I hate to talk like that, but really, like, when I was a couple years ago, I made an LLC so I could do private video work for any client. My first client was like the school district. And I just made a bunch of promo material for their technical center and stuff like that, and made like $6,000 over a few months. So once you make that, that's now a demo reel for you that you can show to other people, whether it's a hospital or anything. Everything in our lives now is advertised to you. And I hate advertisements. I hate to be like that, but that really is, you find out about stuff on your phone and no longer as much through the newspaper unless it's a digital version of your newspaper. And so with that being the reality, like, if you can find the niche of what needs to be done and then put onto these platforms, it doesn't always have to be Facebook or whatever, even if it's just a video on WMUR, that's the most efficient way to get involved, is just like find those markets. Don't just hope that school's not going to give you anything, really. Like, school will give you the knowledge, but they're not going to give you a job. You are paying them to be there, not the other way around. So find those jobs, find that work, go to school if it helps you and if you can afford it. But don't depend on school to go, hey, we're sending you to LA once you graduate. Like, it does not fucking happen. And it's on you as an individual to create those connections and figure out how to move forward as somebody making films.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, I think that that's the end of this interview. Lauren, thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
Absolutely. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you later.